Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this workshop named Sense Nexus Symphony. Thank you very much for joining for this last sessions of the conference. I'd like also to thank the people joining us online. Welcome. My name is Jero. I'm going to be your host in these sessions. I work for Luxinnovation, which is a Luxembourg innovation agency, and I'm responsible for the European funding for digital and security. Why did I wanted to make this session and present to you this Nexus Symphony in the next few minutes? Is because we are launching with the European Commissions and with the member states, we are launching a new page, a new chapter of the European fundings for research innovation with 5G, 5G plus, and now 6G. And we have to admit that this new chapter is a little bit more complex than it was before. So this workshop will be a general introduction to the landscape of the EU funding, and we will focus a little bit more to the 240 million call that are going to be in the next 2 years for 5G plus and 6G. So the objective of this workshop, you might be lost. And I apologize for that in advance already. But I hope that with you, we will be able to scratch a little bit the surface. And you're going to leave this workshop with a general knowledge about this EU landscape. At the same time, because it's a 5G, 6G conference, I'm going to address what is currently going on with the European fundings and where do we go, what's going to be funded in the next 2 years. And I'm going to need your help here. And the presentation will be divided in 3 main parts. So the scratch the surface part. Bear with me for this one, please. We're going to go quickly through it. Then we're going to look at those 240 million euros in the next 2 years. And then first question, the last question would be what to do about that. And that's actually is going to be up to you. So if I said European fundings, most of the time people say complex. It's difficult, I'm not sure to understand completely. So I'm going to try to make an analogy in these workshops. And this is where I bring an orchestra. And that's also why you start to understand the title of this session, the symphony. Why an orchestra? Well, because an orchestra, you have different sections in it. You have the strings, you have the brass, you have the woodwinds, you have the percussions. Well, for the funding for 5G and 6G, you have more or less the same thing. You have different sections. And if it has become more difficult to understand now, or if it's become more complex, it's because what has the Commission introduced now in 2021 is what is called synergies. And not everything is funded at the same place now. Everything is built in synergies with other building blocks. And we're going to see those building blocks together to give you an idea. And then I'm going to focus the composition of those building blocks for 5G and 6G. They're all supposed to play in symphony, like in orchestra. They're all supposed to be complementary. But if you have been participating to a concert, I'm sure you know that sometimes, well, there is a section that starts before the other. Sometimes you've got the flute that doesn't play right. Sometimes you have some hiccups, and that's what we're going to see also here today. So let's go for the first block. But before I start with the description, you must remember, please, some of those information shared today are still under discussion and are still under negotiations at EU level. So it might change. When it's fixed, I'm going to let you know it's fixed and it's open. This is the last part of my presentation. But sometimes I had to say, well, maybe what you're going to hear today might not be what you're going to see in a few months. So let's start with the first program, which I nicknamed for the woodwinds, which is called the Digital European Program. By a show of hand, have you heard about it? I would like to ask if there is a show of hand online, but I don't see this, unfortunately. So the Digital European Programs, in a nutshell, very simply, is a 7.2 billion euro investment program for the next 7 years, which is targeting the building of essential digital capacities for Europe. It's addressing actually the advanced digital technologies and is focusing on funding the deployment and the rollout of those technologies. It's built in 5 pillars, 3 that are technologic, one which is about skills, and one which is, I'm going to call it interoperability, but actually it's addressed far much more. So the three first technological pillars, you can see them on your screen. The first one is supercomputer, so it's HPC, the high performance computing. You're going to probably heard about Luxina in Belgium, in Luxembourg, but Senairo in Belgium, or other distributed HPC infrastructure in Europe. The second pillar is about artificial intelligence. And inside artificial intelligence pillar, you also have data and cloud infrastructure. The third pillar is cybersecurity and trust. And in it, you're going to have also the Euro QCI, so the European Quantum Communication Infrastructures. The fourth pillar, briefly on the last two pillars, the fourth pillar is about skills. It's very nice to have those digital technologies, those advanced digital technology, but if no one can use them or know how to use them, it's pointless. So you have a pillar, an entire pillar, which is dedicated to bring the learning and to bring the skills to the workforce in Europe. And finally, the last pillar, which is about digital transformation and interoperability, this is where you're going to have the funding, for example, for the European Digital Innovation Hubs, for what is called the Destination Earth, making a digital twins for the Earth, but also digital transformation for public services, blockchains, and IoT. This is a nutshell. If you want to have a stronger overview, here it is. You have the different building blocks, and you don't have all of them. And what I would like to bring your attention on for the Digital European programs is the three blocks that are surrounded in red, plus the one for digital skills, where you can see, just say you are hearing here words that has been said in this conference previously. You've got the data space. It has been mentioned that if you want to make a data space, we need to have 5G connectivity for high speed. The European Commission in the next 2 years will fund at least 9 of those data space, thematic oriented, namely health, mobility, manufacturing. They're going to be the funding of the Cloud Federation infrastructures. The word that has been mentioned in this conference was Gaia-X, for example. So this is where you're going to be dedicated European fundings in relation with Gaia-X, building the EU-based cloud infrastructure. And I come back to what is called the Quantum Secure EU Communication, which is actually the QCI, the Quantum Communication Infrastructures. And this QCI is not only found in this program, you're going to see it's also found somewhere else, but this is where you're going to also see where we can bring the cybersecurity to the 5G infrastructures. You will notice that in this program, 5G is not considered as a pillar, but 5G is distributed all over these programs. So if you have applications that focus more on data, that focus more on security, cybersecurity, but where 5G can be used, you will have access to funding there. I go to another section of my orchestra. I go now to the percussions. And this percussion is the European space programs. As I've been mentioned before, the European space program is where you can have funding justly the QCI. But you also have what is called the direct and indirect instrument. And for this, I have to beforehand apologize, because this is a program where I'm the less familiar with. We know that there is the business application, the easy business application, where you can have open calls for application, and there is a strategic line for space for 5G. So the use of satellites for 5G. Here, I'm not in charge of these programs, unfortunately, so that's why I cannot go too much in details in it, and I apologize if you have any questions. My colleagues from Luxembourg Space Agency are the one responsible for it. But you have here a direct funding also for the 5G infrastructure, for the space segment, obviously. And it has been quite mentioned also during this conference for the Euro QCI, but also for the SATCOM. I go now to one of the two main section that I want to address in this session, in this workshop, the brass section. And the brass section is Connecting Europe facilities. This is a program, probably you have heard about it, where the Commission is funding cross-border infrastructures. And cross-border infrastructure, any kind of infrastructures. Of course, the main pillar is about energy and transport. So this is maybe not very interesting for you, except for the autonomous driving test bed. If you remember what has been mentioned on the first day, the Commission has mentioned the fact that there is corridors, for 5G corridors that has been found and will be found for the autonomous driving. This is where you're going to have the place. At the same time, you have a digital pillar, which is far much smaller in scope. You can see the objective written on the right. This is where I've been. This is an snapshot coming from a slide of the European Commission. But this program, the CEF, is about the development of infrastructure cross-border between the different countries. If I go for CEF 2 digital, well, I've been quite lazy here, I'll admit it. There is a small video that makes the introduction, so I'm going to just let you enjoy it. It's 1 minute long. I would like to thank the techniques for solving the issue during the video. Apologies for this. So you understand that actually this program is about to fund high-capacity networks, where 5G is mentioned quite oftenly. Not necessarily 5G, I have to specify. It can be 4G also deployment. It can be also those 5G corridors I mentioned. It funds also cybersecurity, so EuroQCI is going to be funded also via these programs. And of course, there is about a subtopic which is about the digitalization of transport and energy services. But unfortunately, this is one of the sections that hasn't started playing yet, and it's still under construction. So the compositor is still writing, is still composing the music sheet of this section. I now go to the last section that I would like to address to you in details, which is the strings. And because it's the most important section in our orchestra, okay, no comments on that, all right. This is the one I'm going to spend the most time on, because this is the one where we are really actually not only the national contact points, but also the delegate inside Luxinnovations. So Horizon Europe is a program, it's a 95 billion euro program in charge of funding the entire innovation pipelines from the European Union. It funds from academic and fundamental research to the really deployment of the innovations and the deployment and the marketization of the innovations. It has two main pillars, which is built around the policy of the European Commission, the Green Deal, and shaping European digital futures. And this is where you're going to have just the funding for 5G, for component, and I show that in my next slide. I don't want you to remember the structure. It's not interesting. What I just want you to remember is that those are actually, it's a top-down program, meaning that the commissions come with some topics and is launching call for project. And the one section that I would like to focus on is a section what is called Cluster 4, which is with the red circle, which is a cluster for digital, industry, and space. And in this cluster, you will have calls just for the 5G infrastructure, for the space application of the 5G infrastructure, and also maybe for the industry use of the 5G infrastructures. You have here a snapshot of the budget distribution, just for your general knowledge. It's more than 15 billion euros that's going to be invested in the cluster 4. If you have interest in the other field, we'll be happy to go to reply to the questions. The first complementarity that you can see between the different sections of the orchestra is the Horizon Europe and the Digital European programs. You can see that Horizon Europe is a big bubble, pillar 1, 2, and 3 that you can see on the left side of these figures. Digital Europe is the right bubble covering the higher TRL, the deployment and the marketizations. So this is already where you can see a complementarity between the different programs. I'd like to mention here that the size of the bubble are relative to the budget allocated to the different sections. Where it starts to become a little bit more complex, it's one extra layer in the lasagna, or what I decided to call was a new instrument in the string sections. So the Commission has decided to bring a double bass, if you want. And this double bass is actually called the partnership. You have 49 of them. You have a snapshot of all of those partnerships on the right for your information. But what does it mean exactly? A partnership is actually a joint undertaking from the European Commission with the member states, with the industry, and with the research and innovation academy ecosystem, where all those actors are bring together and they come and deliver what is called a strategic research and innovation agenda in the field of the partnerships. So all those people speak together, develop a strategic agenda, and this agenda is actually feed after to develop the topics inside the work program of Horizon Europe. So this is actually a place, and this is actually the partnership SNS has been briefly announced this morning by the European Commission. This is a place where the Commission say, we don't know exactly where to go, we let the industry and the academia tell us where we should go. And this is where we have the 240 million in the next 2 years, and I'll come to that. So bear in mind that the partnerships, if you want to influence, for example, what's going to be funded in the next year, you can participate to those works. You can join the associations that is in charge of the partnerships, industrial association, academic association, depending, and you can contribute to the advancement of this strategic agenda. I'm going to quickly mention here some other section of the orchestra, but I'm going to provide a snapshot of where they stand from the TRL perspective, but I'm not going to address it too much. Just remember there is also InvestEU, Creative Europe Media, which is more for content creation. So if you want to develop 5G or 5G adapted content, this is also where you can go. There is a specific program for health. And of course, there is a Recovery and Resilience Facility program, so RRF. On the second day, we have a specific workshop here made by SMC, where they talk about the fact that these programs in Luxembourg will be funding the LuxQCI, the Luxembourg Quantum Communication Infrastructures. So this is also a complementarity of the funding. Here you have a snapshot justly about where those programs fit according to the TRL, and you can see what are the different building blocks. I don't want you to dwell too much in it. I don't want to dwell too much in it. When you're going to have the slides, you can have a look at it. But the best things you can do is to make us a phone calls, and we'll be happy to drive you through all of them. So now we saw all the instruments, but there is one thing which is missing for making the orchestra play together. It's the score, the music sheet. And this is where I'm coming in, because if you look at all those things are structured, you can see that whereas 5G can be funded, all these different initiatives actually are played by different programs or are joining forces. And the Smart Network and Services Partnership is actually a children of two different sections. It's a children of Horizon Europe, and it's a children of the Connecting European Facilities. And all of that is said to be built in synergies. I'm going to go, why should you care? Do you need to know the music theory to enjoy the Beethoven Symphony? The reply is no. Okay, so this was a scratch of the surface. I don't want you to remember this. What I just want you to remember is that if you heard about somebody telling you there is a funding for this, remember that these fundings can actually be in different places, in many different places. So we need you to broaden your horizon. You're not alone when to do that. We are here as national contact points to help you. But 5G fundings is spread over a lot of different sections, a lot of different programs, all in synergies. Or I should say all in support synergy. And this is where the smart network and services come in. I call it the stroviol. And I choose this specifically because from now on, each time you're going to think about 5G funding, you're going to think about this instrument because it's going to be stuck in your head. So it's a mix between a violin and a trumpet, a mix between the connecting European facilities and Horizon Europe. It's a double fundings, and it's a joint undertaking with industry, with academic research, with the member states, and with the European Commission. What is funding now? 240 million in the next 2 years. Normally 2021, 2022. We are running late for 2021. I'm not going to deny this. But there are 4 streams of orientation, of strategic orientations in 5Gs and 6G. The first one is building on the continuous effort on the previous funding that has been done on the past, in the Horizon 2020, for those who knows about it, where there is an evolution about what has been done. In here, you've got 2 strands: smart communication component system network for 5G midterms evolutions. So we're thinking about, okay, 5G is there, but we might have a midterms evolution technologically. And there is large-scale trials, so large-scale pilots for 5G, demonstrating the use of 5G and also the midterm evolution of 5G. That's the first strand. The other strand is, it has been titled Revolution, 6G. And this is where there is a beginning of the work of the research for 6G. So there is topics for radical technology that can bring us towards 6G. And there is experimental infrastructure that's going to be built for testing 6G. That's the 4 streams that the Commission has set for the orientation. And when I say the Commission, actually, I should say the Commission with the industry. So it's not just the Commissions or the Member States. Let's have a look a little bit in those 4 strands. I don't want to give you a presentation of what are the topics because we are too early. But I've choose here some keywords that has been mentioned in the text, that have been presented in the strategic orientation to understand what there is going to be funded. So they're going to be around a little bit less than 50 million for the 5G midterm evolutions. And you can see here the keywords of what's going to be funded. If you see things that ring your bell for you, remember it. If I go to 5G stream B, I apologize here, it's a little bit written in small. There is 5 strands and one which is transversal. So 5B is justly where we're going to go towards 6G. So there's a radical technologies research for 6G. And you have everything that goes for system architecture, wireless communication technology, communication infrastructure technology, transformative technology, and trustworthy technologies. If you remember what I said about the orchestra, you see that there is things that are built in synergies with all the rest. And I would like to bring your attention to the transversal one, the cross-strand section, where the purpose the purpose is to bring all those strands together in large-scale pilot. I'll present that in a minute. I go back to those to the streams, so the third streams, which is SNS experimental infrastructure. Here we're talking about the first large-scale pilot for 6G infrastructures that's going to be funded. And there is also the fact that those 6G infrastructure should build on what has been done so far with 5G. It's to be funded at a later stage, but that's an objective. If you see actually, this slide is a slide coming from the European Commission, where what they want to do is take the different building blocks that is existing in 5G technologies, the building blocks that will emerge from the first SNS project, and start merging them. So it's really a blended approach for the experimental infrastructure. I make a quick note about the large-scale pilots. Here, it's really to demonstrate the fact that 6G can work. And we have here in this conference a lot of examples that can be used for 6G. So I would say come and look at those 48 million euro funding. This is again a slide coming from the European Commission, where actually you see it's how the Commission wants to build phases. Is any one of you have been participating to the 5G plans from the European Commission, the 5G innovation plan starting in 2014? It was a plan that was built in 3 phases. First, we build the building blocks, then we build testbed, horizontal testbed, and then we build vertical testbed. It's more or less the same thing here. The Commission wants to build the components, that's the first stream. Then it wants to gather those components in horizontal testbed, and then bring the industry to come and use those testbeds. And this is what the Commission wants to see in those 3 phases. I have here a snapshot of what's going to be the agenda, so how it's going to be spread over until 2028. And I think it's worth noting that they're expecting the first funding for 6G infrastructure in 2024, in 2 years. So I'm coming back to my orchestra. Here we have scratched the surfaces. Here we have seen justly what is the SNS. But if you remember where we are now, I'm not the director of this orchestra. I'm not even the composer, but we have a symphony which is written by different composers. So try to imagine Bach, Mozart, Beethoven trying to build the same symphony. I'm the guy with a Spotify playlist listening to it. That's where I am. I am these little kids in the audience trying to understand what actually is going to be played. At the moment, we have 3 programs which are up and running. Horizon Europe is running, InvestEU is running, and the European Space Agency program is running. Connecting European facilities, the digital part at least, and Digital Europe are about to be launched. There have been some delays, whatever, but they are about to start. And why this is important for you to know about this is because if you want to participate to this kind of funding, so if you want to participate to the funding that has been presented just before, preparation starts already now. Where we are, Horizon Europe has started. There are calls that have already been launched. There are calls for cybersecurity, data, and AI coming this month. You can already forget them because this is too late to mobilize. But there is call for the quantum communication infrastructures in January. And I do not want to enter too much in details, but those calls are built in such a way that actually it's going to be a closed club for between 2022 and 2027. So if you are interested in more fundamental, more applied research in quantum communication infrastructures, mobilization is now. The Safe Digital is about to start. Normally, at the end of this month, it should be launched. But I have to admit, I don't dare making any more prognostic about the start. There have been delays, discussion, negotiation at European levels, and there has been continuous postponed for almost a year now. The Digital European program, same thing. It's about to start by the end of this month. And you can see that calls are planned for quantum communication infrastructure, the data spaces, the European data spaces, cloud infrastructure, and cybersecurity for the end of this year. The SNS, however, according to plan, will be launched beginning of next year. So we're supposed to have the opening of the calls, let's say Q1 2022. We're not sure of the first quarter of 2022. And if I'm already bothering you with that, is because the scope of the calls, the necessity to participate, you need to start working on it already now. You need to start to prepare. Of course, the ESA and the InvestEU, to complement my slides, are already up and running. What we are doing, you see that in SNS, member states have a voice. We can influence the orientations of the work programs. We can influence what's going to be funded. With SMC, we have decided to, because SMC and Luxinnovation are both representative to these partnerships, we have decided that, okay, we know a little bit the techniques, but we are not the specialists of the techniques. And we would rather prefer to ask the industry what is the best to be funded for increasing your chance of participation and increasing your chance of funding. So we are setting up some sort of an informal industrial group that would advise us for making the Luxembourg position for the work programs. So it's a call for help here. If you are interested to shape the future position and the future work programs with the help of SMC and with our help of Luxinnovation, we'll be gladly to hear what you would like to see funded. We'd like to hear your recommendation. At the same time, if you want to participate to EU funding, I can only advise to join the activities of this industrial association, the 5G-IA, the 5G infrastructure associations, because this is the association behind the Smart Network and Services Partnerships. This is the association which is mandated by the European Commission to provide the strategic and research innovation agenda. So you can participate at two levels. You can participate at EU levels with this association. You can participate at member states level with us. Start early. That's the first advice I can tell you. Seriously, participating to those 6G calls, you need to do some networking, and that's actually going to be my second advice. You need to do some networkings. It's interesting to say it in the 5G conferences, but here we know Orange is one of the key stakeholders. They are here today. Go and speak with them. We know that Telefonica, Telefon Italia, Atos are key stakeholders in those groups. The doors are still open now. They will close in the coming months. And finally, yes, broaden your horizon. Maybe you never heard about those European fundings, but they are where the risk is taken by the public funding. You have here a snapshot of the different services that we offer at Luxinnovation. This is as national contact point for the EU fundings. Those services are for free, just as a reminder, and we'll be more than happy to drive you in this huge orchestra that has been made by the Commission for 5G. Thank you very much for your attention, and if there is any, I'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you. I'm looking at the techniques. Is there any questions on the... No? Well, this was the last section, workshop of this conference. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for joining us online. I would say let's go have a coffee. Thank you.